Hi, we're out on the range today, so please bear with gunfire here in the background. Recently, a lot of people had mentioned Liberty civil defense ammunition, and a viewer was nice enough to send me some, so here we are. Now this is 9x19 plus P with a 50 grain hollow point projectile and an advertised velocity on the box of 2,000 feet per second. And many people have assured me that if I were to fire it, I would be impressed by the results. Well, let's fire this stuff and see how impressive the results really are. Most auto-loading pistols in caliber 9x19 are designed with the idea that you're going to use 115, 124, 147 grain projectiles, somewhere in there, and that those projectiles will be propelled at velocities of give or take 1,000 up to give or take 1,200 feet per second. The Liberty civil defense ammunition with its 50 grain projectile and an advertised velocity of 2,000 feet per second is far enough outside the parameters of what most handguns are designed to use that it may cost you accuracy, both in group size and the deviation of that group from the point of aim. Now I've got a Beretta 92 FS and I'm going to shoot from 15 yards, and I'll shoot the target on your left with the Remington green and white box 115 grain projectile, and the target on your right with the Liberty Civil Defense 50 grain projectile, and let's see how they compare. I used the Remington 115 grain projectiles to zero the pistol, and the impacts are pretty well centered. With our civil defense ammunition, although we got a good group, we had a significant deviation from the point of aim. Now I've got two new targets set up, and we'll try the same drill again but with a different gun, a Smith & Wesson M&P compact. And again, I'll shoot the target on your left with the Remington 115 grain projectile and the target on your right with the civil defense 50 grain. But this time I'm going to shoot from 10 yards. And we see with our Smith & Wesson the two groups are definitely in a different place, although in this case the deviation isn't nearly as much. Now the question, why did I shoot the Smith & Wesson from only 10 yards? Because I can't shoot it as well as I can the Beretta. But with both guns we see that the civil defense ammunition holds good groups. And although the deviation in group location with the Beretta I would say was certainly enough to make a difference, it's really debatable whether the inch or two deviation here is going to make a difference. I have my Beretta 92 FS loaded with our civil defense ammunition and my chronograph set up at 7 yards. And yes, I have determined how much lower than the line of sight it will hit at 7 yards and taken that into account on my aiming point. The civil defense ammunition advertises a velocity of 2,000 feet per second. Let's see what kind of velocity I get. .2115. 2119, 2111, 2134, and 2106. Let's crunch the numbers. Well, I crunched the numbers and got a mean velocity of 2,117 feet per second. That's strange considering the advertised velocity is 2,000, and I almost always get a velocity less than what's advertised. So off camera I did a diagnostic on the chronograph, and as far as I can tell it's working properly. So what accounts for the discrepancy? Chronographs don't always agree with each other, and certain environmental factors like elevation and ambient temperature can affect chronograph results. But in this case, it may be that the test gun they used had a shorter barrel than the gun I was using. But either way, 2,117 feet per second is very impressive velocity. But how will that translate into effectiveness on a target? Let's put that to the test. Forgive the redundancy, but for those who haven't seen it, we have something that's an analog for a chest shot on the intended target, and it's called the meat target. It's leather jacket skin followed by a pork steak pectoral, pork ribs, a bag of grapefruits to simulate lung tissue, more pork ribs on the back, 4 layers of t-shirt on the front, 4 layers of t-shirt on the back, and the whole thing followed by the new and improved high-tech fleece bullet stop. And I'll shoot this from 7 yards with a Beretta 92 FS loaded with the civil defense ammunition, and let's see what kind of penetration and expansion we get. Well, our civil defense ammunition did a lot of damage to our ribs on the front of the target, just annihilated our grapefruit lung tissue, and all the projectiles went through to the ribs on the back of the target. Now, an interesting thing is, in doing this demonstration with 9x19 ammunition with 115 or 124 grain hollow points, the most common result I get is 100% penetration through the meat target, and then the projectiles are stopped either by the t-shirt on the back of the target or the first layer of fleece. In using the very light, very high velocity ammunition, we typically see a lot of damage to the ribs on the front of the target, but at the expense of penetration. A lot of them don't even get to the ribs on the back. With the civil defense ammunition, all 4 of those projectiles penetrated the ribs on the back of the target. I know it's hard to see because by the time they got there, they had so little energy left. They made holes in the ribs, but that was about it. And all 4 projectiles were stopped by the t-shirt on the back of the target. Now, in using heavier projectiles, even when they don't penetrate the fleece, they typically make a big dent in it, and these didn't. So we see perhaps a potential for a little less penetration than the heavier bullets. But what we're really seeing is adequate penetration and almost zero potential for collateral damage due to over-penetration. Now let me show you a close-up of what these projectiles look like. Here's what the round looks like before it's fired, and this is all I recovered from the t-shirt on the back of the target. The rest of these projectiles were fragmented into tiny bits that were scattered all through the target. So what's the takeaway from all of this? Well, we got velocity well above what was advertised. We got excellent results on the meat target, but the downside of a lot of variation in our point of impact between our practice and our carry ammunition. And because of the cost of ammo like this, the idea that you're going to use it for carry and practice is just not realistic. Now, side note, just because I got the variation I did with this 92FS does not mean you get the same result with your 92FS. You may have variation in a different place or to a different degree. Each individual handgun will have an individual result, and if you buy ammunition like this, you have to test it. Now, an interesting thing about this ammo is with a 50 grain projectile, as opposed to what would be more common like a 115 or a 124, this ammo is very light. And so if you're someone who has a 9mm and is maybe carrying 100 or 200 rounds and on your feet a lot, maybe you're in some kind of security forces, a very light 9mm ammo might be something to think about. But the real bottom line is, because my go-to 9mm handgun is a Beretta 92FS, this is not the right ammunition for me. The variation in point of impact between the practice and carry ammunition is just unacceptable. But if you're someone who has a 9mm pistol where the variation is within acceptable limits, it might be the right ammo for you. If you're someone who really needs light 9mm ammunition, maybe for a 3-day survival pack where you envision a scenario where you'll have to evacuate on foot, it might be the right ammo for you. Also, earlier I mentioned collateral damage due to overpenetration through the intended target. The reality is that when people are exchanging gunfire, innocent bystanders sometimes get shot, but that is almost always the result of someone missing the intended target. An innocent bystander being injured by a bullet that's passed through the intended target happens, but it's very rare. And for your average citizen who has a firearm for home defense or concealed carry, on the list of all the things you need to worry about, injury potential because of overpenetration through the intended target is on that list, but it's pretty far down the list. But if you're someone who has that very high on your list because you're a sky marshal or something like that, then this may very well be the right ammo for you. So, as always, don't try this at home on what you call a professional, and thanks for watching the Liberty Civil Defense 9mm ammunition video.